Exactly off the back of that viewer question that I'm now going to bring into the conversation, SALGA's Lance Joel talking to us about the millions and if not, some could say even the billions that are owed to municipalities around the country as well. Cities of Tshwane and Johannesburg very much have been in the focus. But do we take it further? Let's bring in Lance Joel. Morning to you, Lance. Thanks for your time. So answer our viewer question for me, if you don't mind. We're asking, should other municipalities be doing it as well? And then after the interview, go vote on the website. But what do you make of it? Should they be doing it everywhere?
Good morning, Gareth, and also good morning to the viewers of eNCA. It's an absolute yes that all municipalities should follow and do the right thing. And the right thing is to apply their credit control policies that are prescribed by law. So it is merely asking municipalities to apply the law. As we speak, municipalities are owed in excess of 265 billion rands across the country. And so we need to collect that money to ensure that municipalities are indeed financially sustainable.
So we can talk about credit control, Lance, of course we can, but we're also going to have the other side of this coin. We need to talk about billing control. It's a problem. It's why a lot of people, when I say a lot of people, some customers aren't paying. They say they don't owe the municipality money. The municipality says they do owe the money. The problem is they're still getting their lights turned off. Where do you stand on that? Because it can be seen as discriminatory and unfair.
Well, Gareth, one thing we must acknowledge is that municipal billing has had its own challenges. It is a difficulty that municipalities have experienced over years, but I'm quite encouraged to see that there is a positive response by municipalities in improving their billing itself. Now coming to what should a municipality do where there are instances of disputes linked to municipal accounts. Well, if we want to apply the same law, the law is quite prescriptive as well, is that where indeed a customer received an account and formally lodges a dispute against that account, the law prescribes that you can't enforce your credit control policies until you have resolved that particular dispute. So indeed, the opposite would apply in instances where there is a formal dispute before a municipality.
But further to that as well, let's flip the coin back over again, because what we've seen from the city of Tshwane, Lance, and I'm sure you've seen their Twitter account as well, is companies, large corporations that owe them money suddenly are able to whip out the credit card when they arrive to turn off water and electricity. And I almost get the impression these companies were very able to pay. They just simply weren't doing that. And that is why we're sitting with billions of rands of debt. It's not the people that are necessarily in dispute, but just far too many companies who just don't want to pay.
Well, Gareth, the reality is in excess of 90% of that 265 billion that is due is not under dispute. It is exactly linked to the point that you're making, is that there is just a refusal by the users of services to pay for those services. And it's quite unfortunate that municipalities find themselves in this difficulty because of just not the inability, but just the refusal of those that can afford to pay for the services. We must also acknowledge that indeed there are people, we do know that COVID-19 has brought about its own difficulties, that there are indeed people, businesses, households that are unable to service their monthly accounts, but municipalities have been quite open and have welcomed conversations that looks at an arrangement that could be made to settle the outstanding dues so that from a municipal side they can plan for the projected income, but also the household or the business itself will not be compromised through disconnection. So there are measures available where people are unable to pay, but certainly we are quite concerned where people are able to pay and they refuse to do so.
So that would be the macro view, really, of how to handle the situation in municipalities and governance around the country. Can we just pull this down into a micro level quickly? I'm keen to get your thoughts on this, Lance. We can talk about households, we can talk about large corporations, we can talk about government buildings. How does Eskom handle the situation? I'm going to give you one example. There are many. One example comes to mind of Soweto. What do we do?
So Eskom finds itself in a serious difficulty, and the difficulty arises, Gareth, when you allow for extended periods of consumption without collecting. So what happens is that a bill starts at zero and continues to increase to amounts that are clearly unaffordable. And what should really be done, and it does not only apply to Eskom, the same would apply to municipalities. It applies in the private sector as well. There must be a point where the provision of a service is stopped so that you stop the bleeding, because you can't continue to let the wound bleed, because that particular patient will not be able to survive from that particular bleeding. So it would be important that measures must be put in place that we cap the expenditure itself or the accounts themselves, so that it does not become in the long term unaffordable. And that is a difficulty that Eskom experiences in Soweto. The bills are huge, the bills are high, the bills are clearly unaffordable, and even if those people work for extended time frames, they will not be able to afford repaying what is due to Eskom. And that is a difficulty that many businesses are indeed experiencing.
It's also going to be a difficulty the entire country is going to experience. But as I start saying goodbye to you, Lance, the issue here is, and it's the rock and the hard place, it's the full circle, because Eskom and municipalities can't get money in from customers, infrastructure cannot be maintained, we then get the power cuts, people don't want to pay for electricity because there's constant power cuts. It's just this continuous loop, a hamster wheel that we find ourselves in. And I don't know which side of the coin is the breaking point first.
Well, Gareth, I think we must all do our best by starting to increase awareness around the implications, the broader implications of not paying for our bills, and the impact it would have, not only in the long term, but even in the short to medium term, the impact it would have on the sustainable provision of those services, because there will indeed become a point where municipalities are, as you're saying, unable to maintain the infrastructure to sustainably provide the service, and therefore we must at all costs avoid that. So much must be done by all of us who are in this space to increase awareness around why there's a need to pay for our services, why are we paying for our services, what do we pay for, and what will we avoid in the long run should we indeed timelessly pay for our services. So a lot of education should happen in that particular space.
Lance, sorry, let me just squeeze in one last question before I let you go briefly, if you can. Electricity is just becoming unaffordable as well, though. Is there a way for government, we always turn to government, don't we? Is there a way for government to subsidize more of the electricity? I do think people do want to pay, but it's just getting too expensive as well. Last answer from you, my apologies.
Well, Gareth, as we speak, there's already a free basic electricity component that all of us receive. And the question that you are really posing is to the Minister of Finance when he comes later this month next month to present the budget on what could be done in increasing the free basic electricity or any other free basic services that could be extended. It's a very difficult one within the context of a tight fiscus. I do not envy our treasury that is really struggling with balancing the provision of services vis-a-vis the available funds. So it's easier to say, let's look at government for the response, but perhaps we should also start looking at, similar to what we do, Gareth, in tightening our belts. Let's also reduce the use of electricity.
Lance,
and the
I'm going to have
wasteful
to just ask you to stop you there for a moment, because thank you. I really appreciate your time. You promised to go vote on eNCA.com as well. Should municipalities be voting as well? SALGA's Lance Joel joining us this morning. Let's